Welcome to another episode of Give It a Nudge. Today is super special because there's often guests that take a while to get on, and then there's Mike from Google. Finally got him on. He is coming on to talk about what he's doing at Google, but also talking about what Google's doing for all of us on the planet. So welcome to the show, Mike.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It has taken, I actually don't know. I think we might have wanted to be our first guest like 3.5 years ago. No, but it has taken a while. Thank you so much for coming on. I know your schedule is next level, so appreciate you coming on.
No, of course. I always see that I've always been juggling, but recently I had a baby, and so now one of those balls in the air is one that I really can't drop.
Definitely not.
Definitely.
There's long-term implications to that.
But things are all back in control now, so great.
Well, I've got teenagers. I tell you, when you get out the baby phase, you get to teenage phase, it all goes out of control again. Why don't we start? I mean, look, most people know who you are who watch our show, but for the sake of it, give us a quick snapshot of what you're doing today.
Sure. Okay, so my current role, I work at Google in Google Cloud, head up the VC and Startup Ecosystem across Asia Pacific. Based here in Sydney, but obviously a role that has a lot of focus areas around India, Singapore are kind of key markets for us, and we'll be venturing into China very soon.
Oh, will you? That's another whole. There's a big language problem when you go over there for that.
Right.
Deal with that later. Well, let's. I mean, for a lot of people, Google is dream job, right? And whether they know what that's like or not, like it's like working in a startup. It's one of those aspirational things. It's an aspirational company. You've been there for quite some time, as we touched on before, but why don't we go back a little bit and just talk about how you ended up there? Because I think it's always nice to frame up where someone's come from before we talk about what you're doing. So You've been at Google, what, 12 odd years?
Nearly 12 years.
So is that pretty much from when it launched in Australia, roughly? It's got to be close.
No, I think I've been going for probably 5 or 6 years after that.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we hit our 15th birthday last year.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So how did you end up there, and what were you doing before it? I guess what drove you to apply for Google?
So I'm a technologist at heart. So I studied software engineering at university.
Yep.
I presented at Sunrise last week. And
I missed it. I wasn't there. I wanted to see it.
I told you it was not to miss. I told the story of how actually I first started playing with computers when I was 5, when Dad brought a BBC Acorn back to home.
I remember
those.
And
I remember helping him plug it into the living room TV.
Wow, and you were 5? See, I was probably in my teens.
Trying to work out with my parents. I was either 4 or 5, but I went with 5. And to run a game, you play a game through a tape player, you have to type prompts. So you're immediately starting to learn prompts. And then from there, realize that you could kind of like code games fairly easily. And then I got like a book of code and I was of games. And I would spend hours and hours writing all of these lines of code in order to create a game with graphics to make it a little bit more easy.
Yeah. And the graphics were terrible.
Terrible. But at the time, mind-blowing. So that took me a while to realize that has so deeply embedded in me. And so as I went through, university or school, went towards computer science, university, software engineering, went into a role within the IT consulting space. So Deloitte in the UK and then Accenture over here. And I was working on big systems implementation projects.
Yeah.
It was definitely, tech. And then ironically, when I joined Google, I actually started to move away from tech. So I kind of went into this partnerships, BD type role.
Which makes no sense at all.
Biggest
technology company in the world.
Exactly, it's bizarre, but technology it is, but it's also the biggest ads, one of the biggest ads companies. So it's like, there are a lot of people that are there, working with customers on their ad strategy and just digital marketing specialists. And I was sort of on the periphery of that. I was actually helping publishers make money, so AdSense and Ad Exchange at the time and DoubleClick for publishers. So there was still a tech component to it with what was called DFP, which was the platform for ad serving. And then from there, I actually shifted sort of closer to the money, which was career guidance that I got, stay close to the money, which the heart of Google's money-making machine is the ads business. Yeah. And so went into the agency team where it was like, I wasn't a frontline seller, but I was supporting agencies to support their growth, their customers. And I realized at this point that I'd both shifted away from technology
Completely.
And also I had shifted away from startups, which was the other part of me, which is this entrepreneur at heart and lots of kind of money-making schemes through my early teenage years. But then, legitimately 2 startups while on the side of my day jobs, whilst first at Accenture and then at Google. And so I've shifted away from that my startups wrapped up, and suddenly I was working with large enterprise customers and not dealing with technology. So this is when I felt this really sort of, I just felt this big gap, and I was a little bit lost for a while.
Did you think about leaving?
I thought about leaving, but my first plan was actually try and build a role within the startup space. So the proactive move I took was we got this 20% notion. So you start off doing 20% of your time on a passion project. I supported Sally Ann Williams, who is a legend in the ecosystem. She was running our Google for Startups program locally, which was primarily a partnership with Fishburners. So I started supporting her on that. I introduced Adopt a Startup as a program for Fishburners cohorts, and a number of activities to just try and kind of build up how Googlers can support the startup ecosystem. So then I started to get a little bit of that,
bit of traction.
Traction, but also I was getting some fulfillment. So I was doing that. I was trying to build that out. Sally Ann left, and this was the point there was some white space, which I was jumping into, and trying very hard to create a full-time role. I sort of went from one country manager to the next, and a third country manager, Mel, who's our current VP, and that was going really well. And around about that time, I was just working out, where does this role sit? Where does it make sense for Google to, really fully lean into the startup ecosystem? And the answer was Google Cloud. This is where there's a genuine, ROI for us, but also it's just so much we can be doing to help startups early in their journey. So that's when this role came about, and I ended up, being in the perfect role, the intersection of technology and startups.
That's a great sales story, in the perfect role. A couple of things I want to jump on there, right? Firstly, how many interviews did you have to get the job at Google? Because they were famous for it back in the day.
Yeah, they were back in the day. I think I had about 7 or 8, but
that's pretty good.
Yeah, but there were a couple of other roles I went for, and through the process didn't realize they weren't right for me. So in total, probably about 13 or 14. Yeah,
it's a lot. It's a lot. I remember those days. It was cool. Well, I did some recruitment for Google back then. It was crazy. Not much, because they didn't use agencies.
That's right.
But occasionally they would. And you said something really interesting that I hope the audience picked up on as well, because I very much agree with this if you're working in a large organization, which was follow the money. And I think if you look at the world now, I was listening to a book this morning, which The Direct CEO, which I'm sure everyone knows, right? Now, I've listened to his podcast for years, but the book's really interesting. And he was talking about the rate of change. And that if you're a 40-year-old now, the change you're going to see in a year could have taken up to 50 years for someone who was 20 years older. And a 10-year-old's going to go through, it's just wild, right? This speed of change. So I think that advice of following the money, when you're seeing technology change and you're seeing the revenue model shift so quickly from one thing to other, is very, very good advice for anyone who's out there working in a big tech company, because it's going to keep shifting, right? And that's probably the best way to accelerate your career.
It's true. I would always balance and temper that with, where does your passion lie? What is important to you? And find the balance, because, if you just go charging purely after something that is entirely either a role level or profile or dollars, it's going to have a shelf life.
We might as well go to investment banking. Right. So let's talk about Google, because obviously Google's grown enormously in Australia over, as you said, the last 15 years, of which you've been there 12. There's some pretty cool initiatives and things that you guys are doing now that we touched on just before we started, which I actually want to hear more about. So I think you were talking about 3 or 4. I want to hear about these, because I think the audience will like this. Tell us about some of the projects that are happening at the moment.
So this all fits under our Digital Futures Initiative, which is a $1 billion commitment to invest in Australia's digital future.
So that's the $1 billion just for Australia, right?
Just for Australia, right? And so that's a combination of 3 areas. There's technology, which is, a large part of that will be the investment in the cloud data centers that we've got locally, which we only used to have overseas.
Yes, I didn't know you had them locally. So come back to that.
Yeah, Melbourne, big data center. That's a huge investment. So and makes massive differences for all of those companies that need to keep their data onshore. We have partnerships, and so partnering closely with the CSIRO, and then we have research. And so we've actually built an AI research center that's headed up by Grace Chung. And this is bringing AI experts for both, some of the leading AI experts in Australia, and actually tapping into some of the global talent and getting some of that global expertise to move to Australia as well, to bring, really the cutting edge research, which is, part and parcel of the DeepMind component of Google, and there was Google Brain that have merged together now, recognizing that research, whilst it may not lead to immediate dollar outcomes is just crucial for driving innovation and to bring technology forward.
Absolutely. And that's based in Sydney, right?
That's based in Sydney. Yeah. And look, it's still in the build phase. We keep on asking Grace, what's
no pressure.
Can you jump on a stage and talk through exactly what you're doing? The reality is research takes some time, right? And so initially it's just forming the teams.
Yep.
Then it's identifying the priority areas, and then getting down into the weeds. And so we'll stay patient on that. I think that some of the projects that have come out, most interesting ones are really kind of coming out of that partnership space. So a couple to touch on, partnering closely with, as I said, the CSIRO. There's been a big focus on the environment. So the first one up in the Great Barrier Reef, looking at the crown of, I keep on getting this wrong, crown of thorns starfish, that's right.
Okay, yes. I think everyone's heard of that starfish. It must be nearly extinct.
I hadn't heard of it.
You hadn't?
No, it's so doing the opposite of getting extinct. It's actually killing the coral.
That's right.
It's killing the reef. Yeah. And so they had these methods of detecting these, what do you call them? Not vermin, whatever the right word is.
We'll just go with starfish.
Starfish. And they were very ineffective and very, very labor intensive. And so starting to be able to use imagery, whether it's satellite imagery or planes flying over, to then map out and using AI and machine learning to identify clusters of these and then sending boats out. And actually they're starting to build robot boats to drive out to be able to extract the starfish. Yeah. So from there, that was one we announced a couple of years ago. The more recent one we announced is down in Tasmania. 95% of the kelp forest has gone away due to global warming, climate change. So they're using machine learning and AI to identify, for those that are remaining, they've obviously managed to adapt to survive. The old
you got to work out how.
Something.
Yeah.
And so looking at the DNA of those to identify what is it about that DNA and can we start to replicate it and can we find a way to replicate it to bring back the species and certainly save the
That's interesting. There's a lot of talk about, I don't understand the importance of kelp. I know there is great importance in kelp, a little like bees, but I've got to say I don't understand it. But.
Well, look, I think it links to very similar to another one called the Blue Carbon Project where there's actually sort of a lot of sea forest that's also getting degraded. And the sea forest is actually being an amazing extractor and storer of carbon. So something like they said 10 times more effective than, no stats should be verified, by the way.
No, this is all just made up on the spot.
It's made up on the spot. I don't think anyone has any way of checking stats these days anyway.
No one that watches our show.
No, it's fine.
Should be fine.
So
say whatever you want.
Let's just say many times more effective than trees. And so, but it's much harder to measure where there's a problem because trees is very visual. It's all this is all underwater. So again, using ML and AI, we're actually partnering with the Moonshot Factory, have a program called Tidal, and they're really just looking at how we can kind of make a more sustainable ocean environment. So,
well, I guess it's the same sort of thing, right? You have a kelp and so forth. There's going to be an ecosystem within that, just like there would be in a forest. And if you take it away, there's nothing there. Exactly. So just that in itself. Yeah. I think that's cool. I think that I love how these big tech companies do these things. They actually don't talk about them a lot, which I guess is the right way you're supposed to do it. But I think they should talk about it more because I think it would drive more awareness.
Yeah. There's one that's slightly on the side of is on the side of the environment. So moving more into the medical space, and this is another area. If we think about talking about AI soon, the medical implications of AI and Gen AI. So partnering with Cochlear and a number of other, I think it's
amazing business. Cochlear,
incredible, right? And realizing that there's more that can be done for saving hearing. I've actually got some tinnitus randomly from COVID. Had COVID, and it's pretty loud. I'm not sure if that's going to get covered, but certainly I'd say that tackling some of these issues that over 1 billion people. They can fact check that one. Over 1 billion people in the world have hearing issues, and so this is really needle moving stuff.
Have you ever been to their office?
I haven't. No.
So again, we used to recruit for them a long time ago, and their ground floor is like the history of all the devices. It's wild how successful that's been, and the evolution of those devices. I mean, some of the stuff they do. So I can imagine. Let's go back to one. I actually didn't know you had your own data center here. I actually did not know that. When did that open?
I should know the answer to that. I'm going to estimate 2022.
Okay, so I really am behind. That's 2 years ago. I wasn't aware of that. But let's talk more about the AI because that's what everyone's talking about. That's what I think a lot of people also associate Google with. Gen AI. first up, a lot of people actually don't know the difference.
Okay.
Is that, I'm sure you do. Is that, I'm not going to scare you with that question.
No,
You're not going to go, oh no,
fine.
not more fact checking. But why don't you explain that in layman's terms? Because I think a lot of people don't understand that.
Look, AI is a subset of, it's an over banner for machine learning. Essentially, the broader term for how you can bring artificial intelligence, which is generally going to be looking at the data and understanding how you can kind of make extrapolations from that data. Gen AI is a subset of AI. So just think of it as AI is the broad term. Gen AI is very much about generating content. Now that content may be text, image, audio. They're multimodal, they call it. And we're seeing very much the text and image. We're starting to see some video come through, audio as well, and then code as well, which is a huge one. And the cool thing is that it's not just the outputs that can be multimodal; it's the inputs as well. So starting to be able to get real-time video processing to identify, and then outputs from that where you can, for instance, I saw one the other day we've helped Domain with house viewings. A Domain customer could log in, import a video of their house as people are walking around the house, and then it will automatically create a text description of that house using the sorts of language that makes a house more sellable.
The language that real estate agents use.
Real estate agents use, that's right. And then they can customize, they can tune that model to therefore be more. They can choose essentially the creativity levels of it, and they can also make sure that they match it to the sorts of inputs that they use. So they could be importing all of their data sets to kind of show, look, this is the sorts of ways that we normally describe.
So just like you would with ChatGPT, where you may say, make it more professional, make it more startup, make it more, use longer words, use simpler language, same sort of thing. Right? You're just able to, it's pretty cool. So let's talk about startups. I mean, that's what you are. You're Google for startups, right? That's your world. Where is Google now in terms of that startup space? Because as you said, the biggest thing that they can do is Google Cloud, but they're doing a lot more. So let's talk about that. How's Google getting involved in that startup, which is growing so rapidly at the moment here in Australia?
It is, yes. So we've got, if you look at Google, there are so many different products, tools, and teams that can help support startups as the way I think about it is like start, build, grow, and scale. And recently I've added innovate to that as well, because I think AI really drives into that innovation space. So we've got all these tools, and the obvious ones, if you're starting with Workspace, there's a huge number of startups that their first step almost as a business is to create their Workspace account. So they've got everyone on Gmail and Docs and Drive and stuff. As they go through and they're looking to build their business, hopefully with Google Cloud, but certainly with a platform, a cloud platform, and then how they're going to get distribution through the Play Store, etc. Growing their business, firstly, it's about analyzing your customers, so understanding them. So Google Analytics, you've got keyword trends, got a number of different tools, and then growing to actually grow and reach your customer is when you've got the Google Ads suite, obviously SEM, SEO. And then you've got YouTube and shopping and the rest of it, and Google My Business for the physical spaces. Then as you're looking to scale, like one area that I find really interesting for startups is you've got all this data, your first party data, and then you can be pulling in other third party data as well. You can start to mix those two together and make more informed ad buying decisions, which is basically driving efficiency. And then innovate, which kind of falls more into, as I say, the AI category, which maybe we dig into.
Disrupting yourself almost. So let's go back a little bit, because obviously this is for startups. Now, some of those Google products you talked about, they're expensive. They're a lot more expensive than they used to be. How does a startup go about that? If you're a startup and say you're pre-seed, maybe you're seed, but you're below Series A. Are you making programs affordable for these people to be able to use some? Because some of them are quite prohibitive if they're in what can often be cluttered markets.
Yeah, that's right. So we've got our program focuses in on starting really, really early. So there's $2,000 of credits, which current exchange rate is pretty good.
It's great right now.
So that's for any startup once they've got a website up and running, and it just gets them going. If you think about $2,000, like unless you are sort of using AI workloads, that's going to get you pretty far. So you get up and running. You can maybe do some experimenting as well. As you go through your journey and you take on investment from a institutional investor, then you can be getting $100,000 of credits.
That's a lot.
100% of your costs in year one, and that's both Google Cloud and Firebase as well if you've got app development, and then 20% of your costs in year two, which is another 100,000. And then recently, 9 months ago, we introduced an AI tier. So AI first startups get $250,000 of credits in year one, just in year one.
Got to get into that space, right?
Yeah, exactly. So recognizing that, I mean, if you spend $250,000 of credits in year one, I hope that you have a plan for year two, because it is 20%. 20% covered costs in year two.
That's a lot of money.
But obviously, need to make sure you got the right funding behind you. You've got your business model, you've got traction, that you've got customer, you've got revenue coming in. We all know that VCs are now very focused on that profitability side. So making sure that you've got your sustainable business model. But look, what we're seeing is we're not seeing everyone going nuts and like having problems. We're seeing this kind of considered, careful ramp up. We put a startup success manager very, very close to that startup to make sure that they are using things in the right way, that it's sustainable. Because the last thing we want is people to reach the end of that program and either the business can't continue because they can't afford to continue, or they want to switch to another cloud provider because they're going to get offered credits there, right?
Yeah.
So we want to make sure they've had a good experience, that they're using it in the right way, that they're sustainable, that they've got their other revenue streams that are ramping up, etc. And so then we have customer engineers that support that journey as well. And we look to try and be a good business partner as well. So how can we connect them through to, for instance, a marketplace which allows them to sell their products to other businesses? How can we connect them to investors? Like I play that role in connecting startups to investors occasionally as well. And just trying to help them be successful broadly rather than just spend money on cloud, which is not the right partnership approach.
So that brings me to my next question. Thank you so much for the segue, which was, what is your role? Because there's a lot, right? You've just given us a huge volume of, and do they still do the 80-20 rule? Do you still have your 20% on your own personal projects?
To an extent. I mean, I wouldn't say it's 80-20, I'd say it's more like 120. So I think expect to kind of fully commit to your day job, and then on the side
you can do some stuff if you want to. Yeah, that sounds like every other job, but yeah,
that's right. So still got that. Look, I definitely still wear two hats. So the Google for Startups is more of I'd say it's supporting how we can be good corporate citizens, how we can really support startups in their growth, not with no revenue focus whatsoever, right? So that's like partnering with, Fishburne is partnering with, right now we're partnering with the National AI Center to support their AI sprint. We're trying to find ways I'm constantly trying to find ways to bring Googlers into the ecosystem to become mentors. So for instance, I did the StartMate, I was a mentor on the StartMate Female Fellowship or Women Fellowship, and I brought in 5 or 6 Googlers, to come and join me on that journey, not just my one, but the following years as well.
Awesome.
How can we bring them in? Because what's Google got? What have Googlers got? They've generally got expertise, experience, and then access to potentially some
access
Google
is the
tools
huge
and stuff,
one, right?
So I think that's really important, is keep that going. I've also built this. What do I call it? Because I know you had Cheryl on the call, and she's Aussie Angels.
I
have built a community called Oz Angels within Google.
Controversial.
There is a massive copyright conflict happening right now.
Does she know?
No, I mean, I got there first, so there is an email saying, Cheryl,
cease and desist.
No, it's good. It's all good fun. Cheryl's great, but I've called them Oz Angels, and it's an internal group where we took 55 Googlers through an angel investing course. And I say I partnered with Kylie and Rachel from Flying Fox.
Yes,
And so they helped me build content 2 half days, and we took Googlers who were really keen to start investing but had no idea. So we took them in. From there, the community, that was 2.5 years ago, from there the community's grown to over 200 Googlers that are part of this community.
Wow.
So again, why do I do this? I'm passionate about investing, but also it's a way of actually getting money from the Googlers into the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So that's one hat. That's the hat of like, how can I nourish, support, the rising tides lifts all ships kind of mantra. And then the other side is my day job, the 100% piece. So there I work with VCs primarily, but investors broadly, supporting their portfolio companies as they're looking to build and grow their business. So it's essentially building the partnerships, the relationships, and then saying, how can we help? So we position relationship managers, I said APAC roles. So there's about 70 people around the region that are sort of positioned to build those relationships with the VCs, and then see what we can do with them to help support their portfolio companies.
Cool. It's a very supportive role. So
it is, yeah. I mean, look, with action, right? So it's not all just fine whining and dining.
Is there any of that?
Don't get me wrong, like that bit's great, and there is a bit.
I've not seen that side of you yet. Well, I must be coming at you from the wrong angle.
No, it's interesting. I don't know, I'm not sure. I feel like VCs, certainly in Australia, I don't feel like VCs are like, they're not particularly flashy. Let's take me to the best restaurant. I don't think that happens.
They're relationship driven, but they're not flashy.
Yeah,
I think
they're
you're
not
right.
at all. Maybe it's a thing in San Francisco, but it's certainly not a thing here. So yes, there's a little bit of that, but the core of it is, what can we do that helps their portfolio companies? So examples would be, can we bring them in for a Gen AI workshop has been so hot over the last 12, 18 months. And that started with more Gen AI education sessions. But it's quickly transformed into like a use case discoverability session where you help them find the use cases that's going to change, help them either drive new efficiencies in their business or new revenue streams. And that's what the VCs care about, those two things, right?
Yep.
Cost cutting, new revenue monetization, on top of like finding the next hot deal and, selling it
the
on.
next hot deal's
But the bits that we can help them with are those two things. Yeah. And so security roundtable. Security is so hot. We recently acquired Mandiant about 2 years ago. So getting Mandiant specialists in front of these startups and kind of going, not saying you must use Google Cloud in order to do this, more like these are some of the common pitfalls that we're seeing businesses like fall into. Make sure that you are thinking about security in this way. Yeah. And by the way, this is how Google Cloud can help. And so
enabling.
Enabling. So that's like that's probably more the core of what we're doing is like those workshops, trainings, portfolio day, let them use our office on occasion to bring their startups together. And then just get in front of them and talk them, make sure they understand about the cloud credits program, because that's another one that VCs love because you're saving them money.
Absolutely.
Like it is as good as money, right? And so recognizing that is a big value give that we have. And then just looking at, other more creative ways of how can we support them. And that creativity piece is sort of unlocking at the moment. Well, now that we've got like the core of the machine in place.
You've created your perfect role, I feel. I can hear the energy in your and see the energy in you. Yeah. So, I mean, where do you see this going? I mean, obviously you're in this role now. As we just talked about, this ecosystem is really beginning to grow in Australia. We got past the crazy years of funding and now everyone's building profitable businesses, thank the Lord. Yeah. Let's see where it's going. It doesn't seem to be slowing down. The funding at the early stage right now is pretty good. Yeah. It obviously gets tougher as you go, but it's there. What do you reckon, how do you see this sort of going? The change is so rapid. Yeah. Obviously, there's this wave of AI technologies that are going to come through that are going to sort of change a lot of things. Yeah. What do you see in terms of, do you see your role changing in the future? Is there any kind of thing that the Google guys know that you haven't told the rest of the world yet? Is there any secrets there? What do you see happening? I'm interested.
I actually think a lot of the answer sits with AI as well, actually. So when Web3 came along, it was this, partly sort of driven by cryptocurrencies going.
It was
like wild. Everyone getting very excited. Technologists recognizing that blockchain is an important technology that will be with us over the long period of time. But a lot of like other noise and everybody sort of, throwing themselves into that space. And then that kind of went away as quickly as it came.
That was the crypto crash. Kind of took everyone, because no one actually really understood blockchain. They just knew what crypto was. Yeah. And I still think now, if you ask people, a lot of people don't actually understand what blockchain technology is. They'll just think that's the crypto that went up and down.
Fundamentally, it's very boring, right?
It is boring. It's really boring.
And it's like, when was a ledger ever
It's
sexy?
boring as. That's why
it was
got
sexy
a boring
when
name.
Bitcoin was at, $20,000.
Yeah, you're right. But you're right, it did. It just died off, gone.
Yeah. So then AI is just totally different. AI, the amount of research papers that have been released on AI over the last decade is just phenomenal. Whereas Web3, it was that sort of like 1 to 2 years of suddenly a whole bunch of research. We've been doing, Google's been considered themselves an AI first company since 2017. Mm-hmm. That's when Sundar announced it. He said, we are an AI first company. And what that meant was every single Googler has, every single Google engineer will have, and product team will have like an AI specialist and everyone will have AI training.
Right.
So that happened back in 2017. That was the same year that we launched the paper on transformers, which was really the start of all of this, Gen AI, certainly the text generation and ChatGPT is sort of all led through from that transformers paper. So that's been there for so long, it's built up, and now we are seeing so many genuine, important practical applications, but it is also moving so fast. So the tie back to your question is, just all of the opportunities that are unlock over the next, let's just say 12 to 24 months through AI is just going to be mind-blowing. And it already is, right? If you look back at what's happened since, I remember the first time I typed into ChatGPT was in December the year before.
Say, it wasn't that long ago.
No, that's right. And then just the acceleration and also the realization of the possibilities. I think a lot of people just think about like, oh, it can write me a nice poem or it can help me with this speech that I'm writing. Like the realization of those use cases. I put up a slide on the Sunrise event, which was showing a bunch of the use cases we're seeing across like build, grow, and innovate. And the first one was brainstorming within build. And it's like, how many people are using it for brainstorming? And so
no one.
Maybe
I bet very few. I don't think they are. I think people brainstorm and then go to it. To expand that.
And like you can literally kind of help it to define what is your startup idea, like right at the beginning, and then work. I do feel like they're all a little bit too in agreement generally. I don't know if you've sort of noticed that, but when you type something in, like I'm using Gemini, and I always say, yeah, that's a really great idea. You might want to suggest these tweaks. It's like you can be a bit ruder.
I think it's designed to be that. I think, you know what I think? I think it will explode when it's much more voice driven.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the typing thing, it doesn't enable people to express what they want because people aren't very good at writing or articulating themselves in words. When you can talk to the AI, which you can do now, but when you can do it, make it much more publicly available, I think you'll see it just go wild. Yeah,
I think that's right. And so I've been thinking about it, in terms of kind of three different areas. So firstly, the impact on humanity, right? We mentioned some of the environment. We mentioned healthcare. Education is obviously a really key one. And then I think also, this is sort of under healthcare, but mental health. Like I think loneliness, for instance.
100%.
I just think the companion is going to be incredible. And I know I find I get quite upset by that thought of loneliness. I wouldn't consider myself a lonely person, but I don't know, for some reason it really resonates.
I feel like the episode's turning. I think you're right. I can understand that. You see it in when you watch your sci-fi movies, right? They're often talking to an AI, and you can see how that would who. And there is a lot of loneliness in our world, unfortunately, and it will completely eliminate that.
Aged care thing, right?
Yeah, hugely.
We in this part of this National AI Centre AI Sprint, we just did the judging over the last few days. And about 110 startups that have entered into this, and one of the components was affordable care and living, and the number of entries that are around like aged care in particular. I just think it's like super powerful how much it can help. So that's humanity.
No one will die alone again, essentially.
That's right, hopefully. And then the next one is industry. So the disruption of like the major industries, which are generally quite tied to this, right? Agriculture we haven't really mentioned yet, but sort of links to environment. But agriculture is just incredible. Like a couple of different the Moonshot Factory. I always have to say that because now Musk has done his X. They've got a couple of projects that are looking at agriculture. They looked at vertical farming. They looked at how they can improve crop yields based on soil. That's still Project Mineral that's still alive. So there's some incredible stuff they're doing around agriculture. So that's industry. And then there's business. And a fourth is consumer. But business is the one, probably the most relevant one here, where, as I said, sort of think about like the start, build, grow, the different components. And build the growing piece I kind of mentioned with like ads, trying to find your customer. Like the content creation, ads, writing, like helping run your social media, just
the speed at which we'll be able to achieve. I mean, it's just wild. And it just keeps getting faster. It's quite daunting when if you actually sit and spend some time thinking about it. It kind of really just sort of I drift off into all sorts of things.
And I try not to think too far into the future. So if your question was about like future thinking, and I'm sort of like thinking the next 12 to 24 months, just knowing that there's going to be so much coming out of here. Our job is to make sure that the startups around the ecosystem are fully across all the latest releases, announcements, kind of opportunities for them to either, as I said, drive more efficiencies or build a better business.
It's kind of like being a parent. I think your job as a parent, as you're just about to discover, and particularly for my children who are like 16 and 14, is to really prepare them to be able to deal with this incredible amount of change that's coming and make them resilient to it and accept it and move along with it and not be resistant to it like a lot of previous generations were. Same thing with startup founders, right? And as you know, founders are often quite... strong-minded about their views and don't necessarily change them as easily. And I think that will restrict those founders. The founders that go, you know what, I started doing this, but now I'm completely wrong and I'm going to do this. They're the ones that are going to succeed, I think, because of that rapid change.
Yeah, absolutely. We, as part of my talk, I talked about 5 kind of tips for moonshot thinking and like driving an innovative mindset in your business. And I won't go through all of them, but one of them was around like that sort of 10x thinking that has been synonymous with Google for many years, where if you're just trying to add 10% to your business, you're trying to do those incremental changes. It's important to do those incremental changes, but if you're not pushing for that like real sort of moonshot and that game changer, then you're going to fall behind. Competitors are going to catch up. You're going to quickly be, behind the 8 balls. So trying to drive that kind of, and essentially open-mindedness as well, and recognizing that AI is here to help. It's not a threat. It's here to help. And so how can they take advantage of it?
You should put the Google tagline, Google, keep moving.
I like it. Yeah,
you like it?
I like it.
If you can sell it, it's recorded.
Well, I'll just
so you know it's recorded.
Let me chuck it into Gemini and see if it comes up with any better options. But that has become like a permanent tab now on my. And I'm not saying that's like therefore, it must be a success. But it's just I use it now. I don't know, 10 times a day, and it took me a while to get up to that. But it's just phenomenal.
It's like any habit.
Yeah.
All right, last question.
Yep.
There's a lot of platforms out there and other tech companies. Let's do the sales for Google. Talk to me. If you are a startup, and we're talking about startups, or even if you are one of those people who's burnt all your credits with another platform and wants to move, why Google?
So there's a few key reasons that developers and actually founders are choosing Google Cloud. One piece that I quickly learned as I joined in this role was, and I was so pleased to find this out, is that actually developers find Google Cloud really easy to use. They love the intuitive interface and basically how quickly they can get things up and running. So we've had stories of a founder who moved his whole team to AWS because there was some our credit system wasn't in place yet.
Yep.
But he was actually an ex-Googler. And he sort of did so reluctantly. He got in touch with me. He said, "Look, Mike, my whole team's AWS engineers, but you if you can sort this out, then I'll move them back like that." And so I did sort it out. Moved back, and then the feedback he got was my whole team were just like amazed at how quickly we could get stuff up and running. They didn't realize that actually it's pretty.
That's a great story.
So that's been great. We've put him on a stage once.
I'm sure you have.
But it's really nice to know that when you're out there, spruiking a product, that actually people love the product. So that's where I'd start. Amazingly, we're actually cost like cheaper than our main competitor by quite a lot, which coming from Google, that's not what you'd expect. Yeah. So that's been great. Recently, we did a Finder have been in the news because they just migrated onto Google Cloud, and they're also bringing Gen AI into their business. Very exciting. I think the best thing from what I saw was that we saved them over 50% on their cloud bill. I think it was like 55% over their cloud bill.
That's a lot.
Which for a company that size.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
For any company, it's a lot. I mean, it's still a cost, whatever company you are, right?
Yeah. And then obviously we've got the credits to help on that cost piece as well. Cloud.google.com/startup. And then the other side is that sort of business partner piece. So because Google has all those different tools and products that we can help the startup kind of if they're having challenges with other parts of it, or unlock opportunities to be able to help them grow as well. So whether that's partnering with their ads team, whether it's helping them with a Play Store issue that they've got, whether it's getting them onto Marketplace, the integration with Workspace, I think this is underplayed. If everyone's setting up first thing they're doing is setting up their Workspace account, that means they've created security accounts, LDAPs, for every single one of their employees. They immediately have the security layer built in. So if you then build Google Cloud underneath that, you don't have to worry about all that security side. It's taken care of. So that's like
simplicity.
Bring it all together. Yep. And the last thing I say is that we've always been this sort of open ecosystem mindset. Open source has been something that's kind of gone through with Google through and through. We're leading the way with Gemini, all of our AI offerings through Vertex AI. But we're also keeping an open model ecosystem, which means that we're bringing in models from other Gen AI unicorns such as Cohere, Anthropic. We've got Hugging Face, Character AI, but also even like Meta's Llama and Code Llama. We brought Code Llama in within 48 hours of it being released. So you can access those models from within your Google Cloud account, and it just means that you've got that full breadth of choice. So
that's a very well positioned and placed and probably rehearsed.
No, never.
Spiel.
First time I've ever actually been asked that.
They might try and drag you back to the dark side now with this sales pitch you just done.
Well, I feel like actually it's probably more that I try and explain this to, as I'm onboarding my team, I'm constantly trying
I
to
suppose you must.
make sure you think about how you position this with VCs, because what do they care about? What does the startup care about? And so, yeah, it's rehearsed in that way, but never externally.
Well, it comes up pretty smooth.
Thank you.
Mike, thank you so much for coming. What a huge amount of information. I might have to watch that back myself, because it's funny, I sometimes do these episodes and when I watch them back, I don't remember talking about that. Right. So, because there's quite often...
because you just blank out?
No, definitely not. But sometimes I'll do 2 or 3 a day. I'm doing 3 today. And sometimes they get a little bit jumbled up.
I thought it was special.
You are special. This is the only time you've been here.
That's right.
But look, thank you so much for coming. I'm super keen to see what happens, and we'll get you back on. It's our new thing now. We're trying to get the people back on in about, we'll usually say 12 to 18, but with you it might take 3 years. We'll see. Just to see what's progressed, because I think people like those follow-ups.
Awesome.
But thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it. Cheers.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next week.